A man kept parking outside my son's daycare, taking photos for his architecture portfolio. I called his employer and learned he didn't work there. I started noticing the silver sedan 3 weeks ago when I picked up my 4-year-old from Little Stars daycare. The same car would be parked across the street with a man sitting in the driver's seat, holding up his phone, taking pictures. At first, I didn't think much of it because the daycare building is pretty old with interesting brickwork and arched windows. But after the 5th day in a row, something felt wrong. He was always there between 2 ha and 3 ha when parents were picking up their kids. Always angled toward the playground side where children were visible through the fence. Always alone in his car, taking photo after photo. When I finally approached him and asked what he was doing, he smiled and said he was an architectural photographer building his portfolio. He even showed me a few shots on his phone of various buildings around the city. Said the daycare had great vintage details. His explanation seemed reasonable, but my gut kept telling me something was off. I mentioned it to my wife that night, and she said I was being paranoid. The daycare director said the same thing when I called the next day. Parents see a man with a camera and immediately assume the worst. He's probably exactly what he says he is, but I couldn't shake the feeling. So I started documenting. I took photos of his license plate and his car. I noted the times he showed up and how long he stayed. I watched where his camera was actually pointed, and it wasn't at the building architecture. It was at the playground, at the children. After 2 more weeks of this, I decided to do something. He told me he worked for a commercial photography studio downtown called Apex Visual. I looked up their number and called during my lunch break, asked to speak with whoever handled their architectural portfolio work. The receptionist connected me to their lead photographer. I described the man I'd seen and asked if he was one of their employees working on a daycare project. The lead photographer went quiet for a moment, then asked me to describe the man again in detail. I told him everything. Silver sedan, mid-30s, dark hair, told me his name was David. The photographer's voice changed completely. We don't have anyone named David working here. We don't have any current projects involving daycares. Can you tell me where this person claimed to be photographing? I gave him the address and he said he'd call me back in 10 minutes. When he called back, his tone was urgent. I need you to call the police right now. That's not one of our photographers. Someone is using our company name as a cover story. This is serious. I hung up and immediately called 911, explained the situation to the dispatcher, who said she'd send an officer to the daycare location. I left work early and drove straight there. The silver sedan was parked in its usual spot. The man was taking photos again. 2 police cars pulled up within 15 minutes. I pointed out the silver sedan and watched as officers approached. The man saw them coming and tried to start his car, but one officer was already at his driver's side window. They made him get out and started asking questions. I stood with other parents who had gathered on the sidewalk watching. One of the officers came over and asked if I was the person who called. I said yes, and he asked me to stay while they processed the scene. They searched his car with his consent, and that's when everything changed. The officer's face went from professional to disturbed. He called for backup on his radio, and suddenly there were 5 police cars surrounding that silver sedan. They arrested the man and put him in the back of a cruiser. One detective came over to speak with me, and the daycare director who had come outside. The detective's voice was steady, but I could see anger in his eyes. That vehicle contained over 1,000 photos of children from at least 6 different daycares and elementary schools in the area. External hard drives with organized folders, calendar notes tracking pickup and drop-off times. None of this was for architecture. The daycare director's face went white. She'd dismissed my concerns multiple times. Now she was staring at the police scene trying to process what was happening. The detective asked if I'd be willing to give a formal statement, and I said absolutely. He told me the man had no connection to any photography business. He'd been doing this for months, using different company names as cover stories whenever someone questioned him. Parents at other schools had reported similar activity, but nobody had followed up the way I did. The detective said my call to Apex Visual was what broke the pattern because it proved he was lying about his employment. They'd been building a case but needed that concrete evidence. I gave my statement at the police station that evening.